Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Birds on the Wire podcast, brought to you by the Phantom Mentor Content Engine, brought to you from Phantom Mentor Content Studios. This is a podcast dedicated to the in-depth coverage of the St. Louis Cardinals Baseball Club. We talk baseball like the fans want to talk it, and we are glad to bring you this episode.
Welcome into another edition of Birds on the Wire podcast here from the Phantom Mentor Studios. Josh, a lot of winning since the last time that we've talked. A lot of exciting stuff going on with this team.
I am here to tell you, Colin, that it's very exciting to talk Cardinal baseball after a week like we just had. Coming out of that opening day and watching the Cardinals lose the next day after opening day, I did have a little twinge in my stomach. I gotta admit, I had a little bit of a tingle in my stomach that wasn't good, a little sourness, like, we're heading in the wrong direction. But they come back and they win 4-1 the next day. And I feel like that 4-1 win against San Diego, and San Diego's a quality team, so when we talked about that, it's a quality team, so it's not like these were teams that we should have beaten and we just weren't. It was a quality team.
A team that's currently leading its division at 9-5, in fact.
Correct, and they looked every bit of it, and there's no way to measure this early in the season, but I feel like I was getting that twinge of negativity, and then we start to turn into that Dodger series, and things started looking up. Actually, they didn't start really looking up until about the third game, when I started to realize, we are starting to outplay the Dodgers. That was true. I mean, we lose that game coming out of opening day. Waka gets to start, right? Pods they jump on him for a run, but he kind of settles in. That day he walked 8 guys, didn't he? Am I wrong on that?
Absolutely, and then you look at just this past game, an absolute blow-up start, and the Cardinals steal that game for a huge momentum builder in a game already where you're sitting some guys like Yadier and Molina trying to get them a day off with this extra off day coming up. So essentially that'll be a 2-game off stretch for him heading into the Cincinnati series.
Which is a great idea, right?
A couple of really huge momentous wins for this team. You mentioned coming off of opening day, they start the season out 1-3, tough series against the Brewers, and then all of a sudden, you look at things petering, you're looking at possibly going off on a start to the season like we've seen the Cubs get on, and instead you come up with those 2 games in Pittsburgh, and then drop another couple of games, and you're looking at yourselves 2 games below 500 again, and now this huge response with the 5-game winning streak. And really the thing that stood out to me is the pitching performances, and in particular, the bullpen has been absolutely lights out since Alex Reyes has gone down to Memphis, and now Andrew Miller looks like he's gotten it back as well.
Well, yeah, and I think that if we think about what we talked about last episode, we talked about Brebbia getting more influential innings, like more big innings, big situations, and sure enough, Schilt went to him in some key moments in this 4-game set with the Dodgers, and it was a noticeable shift. And the thing that I saw, I believe that the win against the Padres 4-1 in the last game of that series, even though I was feeling sour, I think that was the one that shifted the whole momentum, because it was kind of like, okay, we played well today, and then we come into this Dodger series. And it could easily be said that the Dodger series is a lot like the Brewer series in terms of we got 2 really good teams matched head-to-head, and it could go both ways. And I think that you saw in those early games against the Dodgers that you could see these were tight ball games. They could have gone either way as well. And I think there was a couple times in the first 2 games of the Dodger series where the Cardinals could have kind of cowered or backed off and let the Dodgers take one, but they just kept brawling. You know what I mean?
Well, Josh, I think that's maybe the most encouraging sign, that even throughout these losses, the few losses that we've seen this team sustain so far, they've kept their foot on the gas late in the game, and it always kind of has that feel that, with this offense, how potent they can be. They surely proved that in their last outing, putting up 11 on the board. This team can get hot at any moment and come back on you, and there's the arms in the bullpen to hold it down and to keep that deficit from growing any larger. And, just a lot of optimism and hope around the way that they can kind of take advantage of those late game situations where we saw a lot under the helm of Matheny, those kind of situations where you got that uneasy feeling and like, man, this one's about to slip away. And of course, a big part of that, the managerial decisions. Are your players feeling confident in those roles? And I think that's, again, where we see the communication between Mike Shildt and his players really paying off.
I have to admit, and there's a lot to talk about this episode because we've had such an interesting, good week, but Shilt's moves, top to bottom, obviously lots of wins, but that bullpen came together. I got to ask you, did you honestly think going into the Dodgers series that bullpen was going to gel like that?
Well, I was fairly nervous about the series, considering this is a red-hot Dodgers team that comes in at 8-2,
right,
leading their division and are scoring nearly 10 runs a game at this point, and you've seen them jacking out home runs left and right, and you just kind of wonder, especially you saw a poor matchup for a guy like Waka, who doesn't have that downward movement on his pitches other than the changeup, really, and an occasional curveball here and there, that this is a team that could start knocking them out of the park on you. And just an incredible job by a few guys, and most impressively to me, the starts by Dakota Hudson and Jack Flaherty against this vaunted lineup. And again, John Gant coming in absolute lights out of the bullpen. Boy, he looks electric, his stuff this year, compared to last year in a starter's role, seeing him back off of it a little bit. Seeing 97 on the gun from John Gant, awfully impressive.
Well, you have to be sort of blown away, and I think we can be kind of proud because we did predict a few things that are starting to take shape. So that makes me happy, Doesn't make me feel like an idiot. the fact that we said Brebbia, and here we go. We talked about Gann a little bit, and here we go. We can't go with the guys that have the contracts. We've got to go with the guys that are performing. And sure enough, some of those things have come to pass, I have to mention that Waino's start against the Padres he basically he was the stopper. He stopped us from losing 3 games in a series, 9 strikeouts, 5 strikeouts the first time through the order. That game, we've got a lot of games that we got to talk about, but that game was a shifter of the internal kind of energy of the Cardinals. You know what I mean? It was kind of one of...
Well, you're absolutely right. It was kind of the turning point, and we had seen so much issue really across the board with not only the starting pitching, but with the relievers of throwing strikes and not walking guys. And Adam Wainwright gives you 6 innings when we had talked about, this is probably a series or a season where we're going to see him struggle to get through 5 innings the way he has to kind of pick around guys. And he goes out there and strikes 9 out with 0 walks.
Mm-hmm.
And ever since then, again, that was the game where we saw Brebbia really get thrust into that high leverage role.
Right.
Andrew Miller kind of seemed to get himself right, even though it was only 2 pitches. Sometimes that quick throwing strike, getting that out, like just that little boost of confidence. A guy like Andrew Miller, who at any moment, when it starts clicking for him, that guy is nearly unhittable. And the attacking nature of this bullpen, I think Dominic Leone said it the best in a post-game interview. I think it was after the 3rd game of that Dodgers series, where he said the mentality of these pitchers right now coming out of the bullpen is to play offense from the mound. And I think that's something that we've really seen these pitchers in attack mode against whoever the opposing batter might be.
You gotta love to see that, and again, I'm gonna harp on that last Padres game for just a little bit more, because there was a couple plays in that game that blew my mind. Okay, one was Bader throwing that guy Renfroe out at third from center when he was tagging. I felt like that was an energy play that like kind of changed the mood of the team. Brebbia coming in the seventh and just locking it down, like just looking dominant, and then seeing Hicks battle Machado for like 9 or 10 pitches and get the strikeout in the eighth, and Machado actually tipped his helmet to Hicks, and I felt like that. And then the fact that Hicks has a great outing, a more than a 1 inning save in that game, basically says, okay, we've tied down the back of the bullpen. So I felt like there was a big momentum shift there. Okay, so I'll let go of that San Diego game, because I just felt like so many things happened in that game that kind of shifted the mood. I didn't see it coming.
You're absolutely right, and I love the way you bring up Hicks, because I think that was such a prove-it game for Jordan Hicks at that point, where you got some guys behind them, a Brebbia who's looking absolutely dominant, a Dominic Leone who's looking very good, and we just mentioned Andrew Miller kind of getting it back. Well, Hicks went right through the teeth of that lineup, and this isn't your typical San Diego Padres lineup. When you put a Manny Machado in there, and I don't think a lot of people realize what a big bat Hunter Renfroe is.
Yeah, he's also a great bat.
Fairly dangerous lineup, and Hicks went right through the middle of it and really pitched his way to success, even though he does have the ability to throw way up into the triple digits. You saw him making good pitches, and I think Yadier Molina, you can't understate enough how much he means to those young guys in those high leverage moments. We've seen it all throughout Yadier Molina's career. His ability to handle young pitchers on the mound has just been incredible, and that confidence really extends beyond him to the rest of the team at that point.
Well, I mean, you think about it. Hicks strikes out Machado with a 3-2 slider after 9 pitches. A guy who throws 100 miles an hour strikes him out with a slider. Only Yachty would call that pitch. So I just and then the last thing I'll mention about that Padres game, because again I feel like it's in retrospect a turning point, was that DeYoung drives in 2 in the 4th with a double in the gap, and then we see DeYoung over the entire Dodgers series be a key bat. Which could you imagine what this team will be if DeYoung continues to hit? I mean, he's hitting 346 after that series. He was hitting 250 or something going into that series, right? So.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, DeYoung's kind of been one of those guys that we've gotten used to. You're probably going to see a little bit less of the average, but more of the power from him. Mm-hmm. This is a guy who is continuing to get better at a rapid pace.
Yes.
I mean, I think it's
he lives and breathes baseball,
and people are seeing Paul DeYoung as one of the premier players in the game.
Yeah.
You look at what he's done improving defensively just over the last couple of years. If you look at the way he's now starting to incorporate stealing bases into his game, the way he's taking walks at a rate that is much higher than he has, granted a small sample size, but at a much higher rate than he has. And you just listen to the way that people talk about him. His teammates talk about him absolutely glowingly. And even though this is a young guy, I see a lot of leadership qualities from a guy like Paul DeYoung. The willingness to put in the extra hours. You can see just his attention to detail with the game, and the way that, as I said before, the way he's continuing to get better at this incredibly high rate. And Mike Schultz said of him just the other night, he is the point guard of this team. I mean, we're talking about a team that has Yadier Molina on it, and the manager of your ball club is calling Paul DeYoung the point guard of your team. I don't know how much higher praise you can get for a guy, considering the other players that are on this team.
Well, I'm going to just be frank. That is fucking beautiful, because the truth is that you've got a young guy as a member of your core, right? So, yes, your team is run by Goldie, and it's run by Wainwright, and it's run by Molina, and it's run by Carpenter. But in that mix is some guys coming up that are showing that they deserve to be considered. DeYoung, without a doubt, calm, cool, collected, always overachieving. And I think that down the road, we're just going to say, this guy lives and breathes baseball. He's not scared to lead, and he's not scared to perform. So he's going to be a major pillar of this team going forward. And so we really cannot be anything but excited about what he's done. And this Dodger series, he just kicked it into another gear, and he became he basically declared or planted a flag. We'll see how the season goes, but he planted a flag saying, like, listen, guys, I'm your shortstop. I can hit. I don't make mistakes. Let's go win some ball games. It was a beautiful thing to watch,
Well, and I think something that really stands out to me when I watch Paul DeYoung as opposed to last year is that when he's at the plate, he's taking different kinds of at-bats this year. You're seeing a guy that isn't as afraid to hit with 2 strikes, that is seeing more pitches, and he's talked about, too, being sandwiched in between
an
Ozuna and a Paul Goldschmidt, just the read that he gets on pitchers, and even watching Matt Carpenter in that leadoff spot, these are guys that aren't going to go up there and hack away on the first couple of pitches and just immediately ground out. These are guys that really grind out at bats. Maybe not Ozuna as much, but especially those first 2 guys in the lineup, and how much that's meant for him. Just analyzing, and you can tell that he really enjoys that taking the scouting and the mental part of the game to the next level, the way that he wants to analyze what pitchers are doing on the mound. There's some guys that doesn't really matter a whole lot to, but Paul DeYoung, certainly I love the word you use, pillar. Like, he just seems like that steady presence that you're always going to have. And then you have almost diametrically opposed to Paul DeYoung, who it's hard to even get him to crack a smile out on the field. Bader just showing amazing skills on a multitude of levels. You see him in the outfield, the speed, the base running, just the high energy that he brings to this team. And they're almost the perfect 1-2 punch of those young guys, bringing his level of play up as well. And now all of a sudden you're talking about guys that you aren't even necessarily trying to lean on heavily in terms of your team's success, that are elevating their level of play. And you kind of wonder, even though Paul Goldschmidt has had so much power potential so far, when he starts getting on base more often, when he starts driving the ball more consistently, when Carpenter starts to get going, because he really hasn't gotten going at all yet. And we know what he can do, again, as we talked about in the last episode, when he starts to get rolling. So just a lot of flashes of huge potential on the offensive end. And when you couple it with what this bullpen has done at the back end, that is the recipe for success in this new era of baseball.
It is. If I were to tell you that Matt Carpenter was hitting 213 and Paul Goldschmidt was hitting 180 at this point, would you give us any chance to have won any games or to have a winning record, right? Like,
I believe in this pitching staff enough to think that we could steal a few games here or there, but to think that this team is off to the start that they're on now at 8-5, and now after dropping 3 out of 4 to the Brewers, you're right up there tied with them at the top of the division. It's got to feel pretty good, as I kind of mentioned earlier, it felt like it could flip into a situation where you're looking at, being the Cubs, where you're 3 games under 500 with about 15 games into the year, and then you kind of have that feeling of you're digging yourself out of this hole perpetually as you go along, just to reach just get your head above water, and
right.
That's a huge luxury to not have that pressure on your back as a team moving forward. And the Cardinals heading into this Reds series have to be feeling good, and certainly that bullpen looks awfully confident.
I think the Reds are a perfect test for where we're at, because this team is gelling in a way that we haven't seen in the last few years because we have enough talent. There was times in the last couple of years we were a player or two short. We were a bullpen arm or two short. We were a starter short. Honestly, I could say that our starting pitching has been pretty decent over this, even the rough period. We just haven't had quite enough offense, quite enough consistency defensively, and the bullpen has not been able to kind of hold it together. But I can see this bullpen gelling, and this is the first season in a while where I can say the dominoes are falling from the bullpen backwards, as I really think that a lot of times in baseball that's what happens. When that bullpen gels, when you know your 7, 8, 9 is in a relatively lockdown scenario, that you've got enough arms out there, everybody starts feeling a different level of confidence about being able to come back and win ball games.
Well, absolutely. You know, it's so much you think about the bullpen and holding leads and not coughing up the lead in games, you know, and being able to reward your starting pitcher for a job well done with a quality starter, just staking your team out to a lead. But how much it means mentally to the team to know that when you go down by 3 runs, like the Cardinals did twice in Game 4 against the Dodgers, that you have that ability to come back. You know, that first 3-run lead was then erased, and then getting back up by Waka, and you saw that second 3-run lead, no runs scored from that point forward. I think it was 5 1/3 innings from the Cardinals bullpen scoreless in that final game against the Dodgers, and it just can't be said how much that means to your team to know that, you know, you can put that kind of pressure on the opposing team. And certainly we talked about the right kind of players getting a chance. It was excellent to see Jose Martinez get out there and, you know, off to a little bit of a slow start, but on base 4 times, 4-hit game, had a chance to make it his first career 5-hit game, was unable to do so. But that guy that's going to make contact and put pressure on the defense, and certainly the entire lineup, the mix of power and on-base ability, I think in those longer series, that's what you're going to see from this team, is that they're going to wear opposing teams down, and their bullpen is going to start to take a hit the way that this lineup can produce and see pitches consistently. And certainly going up against the Reds here, if they can keep the momentum going with just another series win, I think this team can really get off to the start that they want to get on, considering last year, again, it was one of those kind of deals where you're digging yourself out of the hole and trying to make this run. Instead, you can try to make that run the entire season, which is what you see a lot of good teams do, and a lot of World Series teams, is they have that push and that feeling of momentum going throughout the entire season.
I couldn't agree more, but I think that this series that's coming up right now, it's early. We know that. This is a series that is going to help define us again, because we look at that Pirates series, a team that's supposed to finish behind us. We managed to, take 2 from them. Now we're going to against the Reds, much improved team. Even though their record doesn't show it, they've got danger up and down the lineup. It's going to be a real test to see how we handle that. I wanted to ask you how you think Miles looks as a starter. How's he? Because he's looking a little shaky out of the gate, and I just wanted to get your opinion on him. He pitched pretty well in a 4-3 win against the Dodgers. I think he's so key to this starting lineup. What do you think of Michaelis so far?
Well, I think you can see that the book's out on him a little bit, and somebody who's an aggressive pitcher who likes to start batters with strikes and not make any mistake about it, that they're going to come after you when you do have that body of work and that longer film for opposing players to go off of. That's an advantage, and he'll make the second start, and I say win this series against the Reds, I think no one would be upset with a split, just a little 2-game series coming up here on the weekend against Cincinnati. But you think about a guy like Joey Votto, somebody who loves the analytical side of the game.
What a ball player. What a ball player.
Really, just unbelievable. You know, somebody who might be able to take advantage of someone like Miles Michaelis. But I think the game plan from Miles in the long run is always going to be something that you want to see out of your pitchers. He hasn't gone over 100 pitches and 96 pitches in his first 2 starts. And 3 earned runs, you know, you can live with that. The Cardinals have won both games that he has started this year. If you give this offense a chance, you know, they will win you games. And it really comes down to, can you give enough innings to get to this bullpen and keep those guys fresh at the back end? Because we're starting to see this is a group that is dangerous and you can trust at the back end. You don't have to be perfect as a starter like you might have had to have been in the past to hope to come away with a win for this team. So what you're seeing out of a guy like Miles Michaelis, if he can continue to, you know, not have that blow-up start, anything 3 runs or less is going to be absolutely perfect for this team. And moving forward, I have no doubts that he'll be able to do that. And it's just nice to know that every 5th day you can count on at least one of your guys really attacking the opponent. And I think you'll see here soon Miles Michaelis will get back to going 6 to 7 innings on a regular basis for the St. Louis Cardinals.
Michaelis is a throwback almost. You know what I mean? He's a guy that, you know, you don't hear a ton of people talking about, but he just goes in there, he pounds the strike zone, and he makes people hit his best stuff. And when they hit him, he doesn't give a shit. And when they don't hit him, he's not celebratory that often, you know what I mean? He's really a kind of a throwback, almost like 70s, 80s pitcher. I don't even know, like, you know, with the mustache last year, definitely 70s. But now, he's at least come into this century, and he's really solid. And Hudson, we have to give him a thumbs up. And I just out of like just guts. I mean, he went 4 2/3, and they pulled him at the right time, to be honest with you, because Brebbia comes in, strands the bases loaded, and another key situation. So I thought Schilt pulling Hudson at the time he did in that game. The one thing that I thought about that game on the 9th was that Bellinger can hit. I did think about that. I was like,
oh my goodness,
God, that guy can hit. You know, you're basically just trying to. It's funny, Bellinger and Yelich, right? Like we looked at the Brewers, and now we look at the Dodgers, and Bellinger and Yelich. Those are the 2 guys that, you know, I talked about, guys that look like they can play baseball. And they're just built for it, you know? And it's funny because I just watched a documentary about Ted Williams, and one of the guys that spoke in that documentary who had read all the writings of Ted Williams was Joey Votto, right? And he was in that documentary over and over again explaining the science of hitting, a book written by Ted Williams. And if you want to see the science of hitting in action, Votto is obviously one of those players. But you can look at Yelich, and you can look at Bellinger, and you've got the 2 young guys that are swinging the bat like a young Ted Williams, and it is really fun to watch. I don't like to play against them, but luckily, as a team, we took care of the Dodgers. And I thought about during this Dodgers series several times. I was like, the Dodgers are not mailing this in. They're not laying down in these games, but the Cardinals just kept coming. And so I really I really found that exciting to watch a great team like the Dodgers, but then the Cardinals just, you know, it's like a great horse race. They just were running alongside each other that whole series. And to see Waka go out there and get basically handled this last game of the series, and to see us basically return fire on Walker Buehler, man, who's like
Walker Buehler.
Yeah.
You know,
his stuff is lightning.
unbelievable. You know, he lost his control a little bit there in the second inning, but again, you have to give credit to the Cardinals. I think in that situation, the way that they put up tough at-bats, and the guy that really stood out to me in that game was Jed Jerko for limited playing time so far this season, coming off the DL, the IL now, excuse me, not too long ago. He took incredible at-bats in that game, took a big-time walk, worked the count, came back from a couple of 0-2 counts, I believe it was in that game, and just put all kinds of stress on Walker Buehler until eventually he bent, and he finally broke, and the Cardinals got to him, and it was a collective effort, of course, more than just Jed Jerko doing damage against him. He took a fastball the other way at one point that was just a great piece of hitting, and for a guy like Jerko who tends to be on the pulling off the ball side of things, if anything, I think that's an excellent sign to think that that's your first option off the bench. And those are the kind of things that you see with these really dominant teams and teams that can go deep in the playoffs. The Milwaukee Brewers, they have that same ability to turn to their bench and have a dangerous option at any given point. And the Cardinals really kind of have that on the offensive end for the first time in a long time. I think you have to go back all the way to kind of the 06 through 09 years when that offense really was a juggernaut to the level that we're seeing that this offense could potentially be. But lots of exciting things to look forward to on both sides of things. And Dakota Hudson, you know, you talked about that performance where he goes 4 2/3, and I wonder also maybe a little bit awkward for him coming off of that bullpen appearance beforehand, just about 5 or 6 days beforehand. But as you know, pitchers are such creatures of habit. That's a tough thing to be, you know, used in a different way and then be expected to go right back to being a starter as a young guy. And then, you know, just the confidence that the coaches thought that he would be able to handle that kind of a thing. And then Schilt, you know, not afraid to pull the trigger, right, like you said. And we talked about Brebbia possibly being a setup guy. Well, the high leverage situation is really what we've seen out of Brebbia. He comes in and gets that bases loaded strikeout with 2 outs that was just absolutely huge to maintain that lead at that time and eventually come away with the win. And, you know, you can't say enough about what the bullpen did in clutch situations, particularly John Brebbia, who we talked about extensively last episode.
Yes. And he shaves off his beard. He looks like a little boy out there. He used to look like a lumberjack. Now he looks like he's like 14 years old, and he is more confident than I've ever seen him. And somebody must have walked up to him and just said, "Listen, man, you're in the major leagues for a reason. Go out there and throw." And every pitch that he throws looks like that he's confident in where it's going and why he's doing it. And he's a 2-pitch pitcher. I mean, he's a fastball slider guy, and he's relying on his stuff, and he's being courageous out there.
But he's being put into situations where he can be successful, and a lot of credit has to go to the staff of the Cardinals for that. It's another one of those situations where, you know, with Mike Matheny, he kind of has his guy for whatever inning it might be, and you can see the approach in the way that this bullpen is being handled, and it was a severe shift from when Mike Schilt took over as the manager of the St. Louis Cardinals. There is much less attention paid to as to which inning a certain guy is locking up. It just depends on that specific game situation, and John Brebbia, such right-handed batters look incredibly uncomfortable against this guy, and rightfully so. That wipeout slider combination with that just rising and slightly coming back up in at you just gets right in on your hand, and then all of a sudden it's tailing away off the plate and you can't even handle it. It has been such a dominant combination for him, and the credit the coaching staff for putting him in situations where he has gone up against almost exclusively right-handed batters and showing exactly how dominant he is in that role. So just a great thing to see moving forward. And I'm also very interested to see, what Adam Wainwright looks like, coming up here against the Reds to start this series, coming off of that last start. Just a completely different, it was almost like throwback Adam Wainwright.
Yeah.
All the strikeouts and missing back.
I mean, people don't realize, or maybe they do, I'm not sure, but I'm saying Wainwright was never 95, 96, ever. Even when he broke off that curveball against Carlos Beltran as a closer to win that series, he was still 92, 93. But his ball always had some get up and go, right? That maybe he's lost. Maybe he's lost that finishing heat, but he was throwing 91. I think he might have even hit 93, 94 the other day. And I don't know if we can expect that every time out. But if we get anything out of him, with the idea that Carlos Martinez is coming back at some point, or maybe Alex Reyes is coming back at some point, I mean, we are, Ponce de Leon, we are still loaded up. We still got things on the back burner that could come following through. And if Wainwright pitches anywhere even close to that in the fifth spot, oh my God, the possibilities are limitless in terms of what this team can do, because there is enough offense. And defensively, we're solidified. Defensively, we've got a center fielder who covers tons of ground and fundamentally plays like he's in high school. Like he's literally two-hand catching everything. Like he literally throws to the right base. This is not something we've seen. There's no hot dog really. The invader, there's not a bunch of hot dogging out there. He's really just making the plays, And then you got DeYoung shutting it down. We know what Wong can do at second. Molina, now up the middle, we're solid. So if this pitching staff does what it looks like it's possible to do, we are going to be in some amazing shape.
Well, certainly, you talk about a little bit of that higher velocity for Adam Wainwright, which is always going to help, but something that really stood out to me in that San Diego game, his previous start that, we talked about kind of getting the Cardinals on this roll.
You're going to talk about Uncle Charlie? Are you going to talk about Uncle Charlie?
I'm going to talk about the cutter.
The cutter.
I think the cutter is what was setting up Uncle Charlie all day long. When he has command of that cutter to both sides of the plate, and a lot of times you think of, as a right-handed pitcher, that cutter being a great neutralizer to the left-handed batters, something coming in on their hands just to make them think in the back of their head that they can be made uncomfortable on that inner part of the plate.
Yeah.
He has located that pitch wonderfully to right-handed batters. And coming in that front door to right-handed hitters where it doesn't even look like it's going to be a strike out of his hand, and then all of a sudden at the last second it comes in and it's a strike. And now you have to think about that. It's one thing to have the pitch, but to be able to command it and throw it for a strike like he did in that game, and he didn't get the strikeouts with that pitch, but just the fact that the hitter knows, oh man, first of all, he's putting them in bad situations, the fact that they're going to be behind in the count as opposed to not being able to command that pitch and falling behind himself. But now they have that extra thing to think about in the back of their head. And Uncle Charlie, we found out, is just as nasty as it's ever been. So,
well, it's coming back. Last year, it wasn't as 12-6 as it had been in the past. It was a little bit of it had a little bit of a sweep to it, a little bit of a right to left movement instead of straight up and down, which was always his trademark. That ball used to break 12-6, right? We saw breaking 12-6 the other day, are very close to it. Maybe not quite as when he was in his prime, but it was dangerous enough. And the other thing that I think that I noticed about him,
he altered that arm angle a little bit to help that cutter out.
Yeah. The other thing I noticed about him is that, he used to pound the bottom of the strike zone, and I see him using four corners of the strike zone now and hitting his spots, right? Yeah. So he's up and in, he's down and away, he's in, right? He's got a rising fastball that he uses up in the corners of the strike zone. He's got the cutter going low and away or up and in to the lefties. He's got the curveball going 12-6 again. So we might be seeing a resurgence. We'll just see if his body holds up. Correct?
Well, absolutely. It comes down to command, because he might not have the stuff to get away with that four-seamer up in the zone over the plate. But if you locate it up in the zone, and we talk about how nasty his curveball is all the time, that's something that the hitter has to look out for, that fastball coming in on that same plane. It adds another dimension to how tough that pitch is to hit, because your hands are slowed down ever so slightly, because that ball could go tumbling down into the dirt at any second and end up being that 12-6er, right? Mm-hmm. So it's certainly a combination that, if he can keep this up, a lot of bright things on the future for Adam Wainwright, which I know a lot of people thought were skeptical, including myself, as to whether it was a genuine move towards winning with him in the rotation to start the year.
Don't you feel like we're more scared of watching him fail? Like, we love him, we don't want him to fail, right? So we're a little bit scared of, like, it's like if a member of your family was struggling, and you're just like, man, don't send him out there because I cannot watch him fail. He's Wayno, right? And to see him succeed is it's just great for everybody, And there was an interview with Wong after the game where he was just like, he's like, Jimmy the Cat was like, hey, you did this, you did that during this game, Wonger, and Wonger was like, let's not talk about me. Let's talk about Adam Wainwright and what he did today. He reestablished himself, a guy who's like, people were questioning whether he can continue, and he put himself out there today and just went after him, and we were so glad to win behind him, and I thought that was really, really super cool, you know what I mean?
Well, I think it's great that you mentioned that, because we talk about all the numbers, we talk about the mechanics, and all Adam Wainwright's pitches and how they're working off of each other and all of these things. Well, team chemistry means a lot at the end of the day too, and you can tell that this team genuinely loves each other. You saw it that.
I gotta give it to Schilt, man. I gotta give it to Schilt.
Right, you have to. He has been the one that's been the glue guy and brought everyone together. That Matt Carpenter press conference with the extension, he talked about extensively his love for this team and his motivation to stay here in St. Louis. And he has that previous World Series ring. Feels like he didn't really earn it, not being on the roster at the time, in 2011. But still, he feels that there is something special about this team, and you can tell that it's genuine in his voice. And, to be honest, just a couple of years ago, there weren't any players on this team saying things like that. I think they knew in the back of their head that they didn't necessarily have the group of guys, and maybe not the right guy at the helm either, for them to get to the place that they wanted to be. And there is a genuine belief between all of these guys, and you can tell that the way that they mesh and love each other, just even the way that, we were kind of harped on Ozuna and his performance moving forward.
We're going to get on that. We're going to get on that.
Out there in the outfield, which was the joke of everyone.
Let's stay off that for a second, because we got to go there. We got to go there.
I believe that made its way onto the Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman First Take show in the morning, then he comes back the next day.
That probably made it on Ridiculousness. That's how bad that was. It probably made it on MTV's Ridiculousness or Tosh 2.0, like just any video show where it shows people sucking. That would have made it. But I wanted to say one thing, and then we'll go to Ozuna, okay? Ozuna's next on the docket, okay? But the truth is I never liked the idea that they were always harping on the Cardinal way. I mean, it was beautiful during those years when we had Pujols and Chris Carpenter and, like, these guys that were, like, again, pillars of this Cardinal organization. But we went through a couple of years where now it's talking about the Cardinal way was kind of bullshit, you know? But then you look at this team now, and Carpenter is a Cardinal, and Molina is a Cardinal, and Wainwright is a Cardinal. And there's guys on this team that want to be Cardinals, right? And I'm going to dare say that I don't think Dexter Fowler wants to be a Cardinal. I watch him play, and I know he likes his money, and I maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I don't see a guy
I think even a Marcell Ozuna, you know, I'm not sure that he's necessarily a Cardinal, and, you know, his agent is Scott Boras. And
I think he's Marcell Ozuna. I don't think he's a Cardinal, you know? I think he's Marcell Ozuna before he's a Cardinal. You know what I'm saying? Like right. In a way, and I won't relate him to this, but Manny Ramirez was Manny Ramirez before he was a Red Sox almost. You know what I mean? Like he was the guy's bigger than his ego, or the way he goes about things is kind of bigger than, you know, even when he's doing the handshakes after a home run or whatever. I don't mind any of that. That could be totally fun, you know what I mean? But it's almost like that's his favorite.
Oh, you need that.
But that might be his favorite part of the whole process. Like he loves it, you know? So here's my thing though. If you forget about everything, the guy is still being productive. Even like I've seen Matt Holliday trip over his own feet in left field. I've seen Chris Duncan, like blow plays in left field. I've seen Matt Adams blow plays in left field. You know, you don't have to be a defensive rock in left field to be valuable to a team, right? I mean, we've got a lot of bad left fielders in this league who can hit, right? Ozuna won a Gold Glove, so he shouldn't suck, right? But somehow out there, he looks like a rugby player playing left field. Like, he's like, when he fell off the wall the other day, okay, we're going there. You know, I wish I could play the clip. I really do. But I don't really want to harp on that as part of this show, but I just want to say that was the dumbest thing I think I've seen. And, you know, you brought it up.
He did it last year in Milwaukee. He did the same thing where he went to go scale the wall on a ball that he thought was going out of the ballpark.
That's some little league shit, man. That is some little league shit right there.
It really is. And, you know, there are guys like Ball Game, so Jimmy Edmonds, so intertwined in this ball club and what he's doing working with the outfielders. You know, he had to just be banging his head up against the wall after seeing something like that.
Do you think he went to Ozuna and mentioned, like, just called him out? Because honestly, the next day Ozuna came out and he was on fire. I mean, he manufactured.
Well, I think Ozuna kind of called himself out. He mentioned it himself in the post game that he got to the ballpark a little bit earlier the next day, got into the gym, did his workouts, took a little extra BP, and had that little extra motivation, and then he gets a piss rocket off the pole, you know?
Yeah. I mean, he comes in the next day in the 7-2 win against the Dodgers in the third game of the series, and he manufactures a run in the first. He steals third and scores.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I skipped the game in between there. That was
but no, he still hit. That's the night he hit the one off the foul pole too. So he
got it done. He was 3 for 4, 2 runs and 2 RBIs.
Correct.
You can't ask for much more production than that.
Correct, and I think that what happens there is that your teammates basically pick you up. You fall on your face in left field, and if the team was being carried by you, the whole situation would have like destroyed like the next week of the season. You know what I'm saying? But the rest he came in, did the extra work, came out on fire the next day, and the rest of the team kind of rallied around him. That's what a team is. You know what I'm saying? That's when you can see the Cardinals. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go.
Absolutely. But you see Molina, you know, gets his first home run of the season in that game, and that was again right in the middle of the streak from Paul DeYoung, where Paul DeYoung has been so instrumental in all on. He has been not only driving in runs, but he has been such a table setter for that bottom half of the lineup. You see Bader maybe not doing a ton of damage with the bat, but getting hit by 2 pitches in the final game against the Dodgers, driving in runs that way, and then scoring from second on a wild pitch. It just seems like
that was amazing.
Talk about from Harrison Bader every week, where you're just like, did you see that? Where it just gets you pumped, you know that the bench feels that. You know the rest of the guys feed off of that energy.
We were talking about Uncle Charlie earlier, and Harrison Bader can't hit Uncle Charlie if his life depended on it, right? So he's got to work around. He's got to work around that, right? So he does. What he does is he doesn't try to hit Uncle Charlie unless it's the do or die situation, right? But he gets on base. He takes one off the arm. He steals bases. He scores from, he's the Energizer Bunny. Most people would put him, again, he would be a leadoff man for a lot of teams, man. And I'm glad he's not the leadoff man for our team. I'm glad Carpenter is. I think that this lineup is going to set up well, because the greatest thing about this lineup is that you never know who's going to burn your ass. Do you know what I mean? You, every night you go out there, you think it's going to be Goldie, you think it's going to be somebody else, you think it's going to be Carpenter, but maybe it's Molina, maybe it's Wong. And to see Wong, Wong's falling back to the pack. I think he's hitting 302, but with 3 bombs, 392 on base, 997, okay, you're still good, I want to mention a couple of things, okay? I want to mention Wieters. When he was catching that game with Waka, I was like, oh shit, he doesn't know he's not going to be able to pull him through this, because we're so reliant on Molina that we just don't know that another professional catcher can actually do this. But and I can't say that Wieters did it behind the plate, but he had a clutch hit, and he did things in that game that made me go, they made a right choice making this guy the backup, man. This guy is a professional catcher. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, absolutely. You're talking about a guy that has been first of all, he's been an all-star before. Mm-hmm. And second, he's been a starting catcher his entire career.
Yeah.
You're talking about one of the best backup catchers in the game in a situation where that hasn't been a luxury that the Cardinals have had, mostly because it's not been out of necessity. But you're seeing, again, a theme that we talked about kind of early on I think it was in the first podcast, about this team having a little bit of an embarrassment of riches, where you saw, good situations coming into the season in the past, 4 or 5 years where, you got a good option for your starter, and then about 2 deep everywhere across the board. Now you're looking at, and then not that great backup catcher. Well, everything has kind of gone to the next level depth-wise. Now you're very solid through not only starters, but that potential guy that needs to slide in at any given point in a Jed Durko and an Alex Reyes.
They're all dangerous. They're all dangerous. Tyler O'Neill, dangerous.
Right. You're looking at dangerous major league starter caliber players that don't have room to crack this lineup.
Right.
That is the sign to me
of a good ball club.
You really have a very good team, and it's a team that could potentially sustain injury, which, throughout a 162-game grind of a season is going to happen at some point. Of course, you hope to be healthy as you can be towards the end of the year, but it's inevitable that it's going to happen at some point. And when it does, this team, you're not going to see that huge drop-off in the level of play, and you're not working with this smaller margin for error as you were before. Now it's a little bit more forgiving, and like you saw in that Game 4 against the Dodgers, a lot of times when we saw the Cardinals, something that had always been frustrating to me was you take the first couple games of a series, or you take the first 3 games of a series, and then you give those guys the day off. Well, your replacements weren't good enough to win you that game. You didn't see the Cardinals sweep a lot of teams. Well, now you're looking at plugging in Tyler O'Neill, Jose Martinez, Ched Jerko, Matt Wieters, and you go out and score 11 runs and beat the team who's the defending pennant champion.
Well, we're going to have to fucking disagree on something, okay? So I've decided that I'm going to say that Matt Wieters should start in front of Yadier Molina for the rest of the year. No, there's no way that we can disagree on that. No. So we're just going to have to let that go. We're just going to have to continue to agree, if that's okay with you. I would just like to say, I have 2 questions for you as we get ready to close this episode of the Birds on the Wire podcast. Jack Flaherty, is he our ace? How do you see that working out to where if we had a 1 game to win, who do you give the ball?
Boy, I think in terms of potential and what they can be, you're seeing
1 game to win, who do you give the ball?
I think in that wild card game, it's got to be Jack Flaherty because he's the kind of guy that's going to miss bats. And
not Michaelis. It's going to be Flaherty.
You have the bullpen now to complement someone like Jack Flaherty in that playoff type situation where it's 1 game, all the marbles on the line.
Yeah.
You need to go towards absolute run prevention. Jack Flaherty has to be your guy. I mean, he looks like Max Scherzer at times out there on the mound.
I agree, yeah.
The filthiness he's got with that fastball slider combination, it is absolutely filthy to watch.
And he calls Bob Gibson every night, so that's going to work in his favor. That's like calling Jesus. that's like calling the pitching Jesus. Like you're like, hey, Jesus, I'm going to need a little help on this. That's Bob Gibson in terms of pitching, right? So go ahead. No.
You have as the Cardinals. That's the advantage you have as the Cardinals. A storied franchise with a laundry list of guys like that you could turn to and get advice from that stay in close contact with the organization. Just another reason why we all love our Birds on the Wire and the tradition that comes with this club.
I found this picture of Stan the Man and Ted Williams. I think I'm going to hang it in the studio here so that anytime we're doing the show, we can take a look at Stan the Man and Ted Williams and just appreciate like what real Cardinal baseball is, what it means, how long it's been going on. And staying with the point, my last thing I want to ask you is David Freese comes back to St. Louis and was very quick to tip the hat to the Cardinal crowd. Do you think that's an indicator that he thinks this is over, that he wants to give one last, goodbye to the Cardinal fans? Because he was always a little hesitant to, have that much fanfare, but he was very open to just tipping the hat every time he went up to the plate.
Well, I guess here's the point where we can really disagree is I think it has less to do with everything that you just talked about and more to do with Yadier Molina in the level of respect that he has for David Freese and understanding what a big part of that World Series run that he was coming up huge in that Game 6 and Game 7. He was the one that was standing up and making sure that the crowd gave David Freese his due justice when he came to the plate, because
but I've never seen David
with this club.
David Freese was always reluctant. He was always, when Yachty would do it, David Freese would stand there for a minute like, Yachty, come on, man, let me just do my job, This time around, he's tipping the hat right out of the gate. He has no problem with it. He's basically acknowledging his love for St. Louis and what it meant to his career. I just thought that was really interesting to see him be every time up. It didn't matter if it was the first time up or the third time up. He was willing to take his helmet off, wave it to the crowd. I mean, we talked about Ted Williams. Ted Williams didn't take his hat off. He would not tip his hat off to the crowd his entire career because of stuff that happened early on in his career. You know, and so to watch David Freese tip his hat, I think he's saying basically this might be the last time I'm in St. Louis.
Well, I think that's a great point, but you also have to think about this. This is a guy that went on another deep run into the playoffs last year, got to the World Series, and couldn't come away with it. Do you think he feels like, wow, like this really is such a special thing to actually come away with that World Series trophy and be a champion, because it is so difficult to do. It is so hard to be that team that comes out on top. There's only one team every year, you know, and so often you see in the game of baseball, you can have the best team and it doesn't mean anything come the playoffs. It's going to be a crapshoot, and you just never know when it's going to be your time or if it's ever going to happen again. And I think that probably hit home to him how special what he did here in St. Louis, that performance was in the World Series.
It was. I mean, it's a straight up golden moment. It's a golden run. I don't know if I ever told you this story, but on August 30th, I bought my dad an autographed David Freese baseball. It cost me $49.99 online. The only reason I bought it was because he had almost all the memorabilia that a Cardinal fan could have. Like his pictures and autographs and Stan Musial autographs, right? And I was like, well, let me get him something for his birthday, which is on August 30th, that he would never have. This new third baseman, there's no chance that he has an autographed baseball from this guy. So on August 30th, we're 10 games back. I buy him that baseball for $49, and the Cardinals start tearing it up to the point we know when Atlanta loses the last game, we're celebrating, we make it to the goddamn playoffs, and the next thing you know, we're in the freaking World Series, and David Freese is on a terror that nobody can imagine, and he hits that home run. We win the World Series. 1 week later, I text my father and I say, Dad, you know that ball I bought you for $49.99? It's now worth $500. And he texts me back, I'm not selling. And so that's what David Freese means to St. Louis Cardinal fans. He is a game changer. The history of the Cardinals wouldn't be the same without him. And I thought it was really a beautiful thing to once again see that St. Louis is a town that just appreciates baseball. And it might be a throwback scenario, you know, throwback town, throwback history, whatever. But David Freese is always going to be a part of it.
With that said, I'm sure we'll have a bunch of great stuff to come next time as this team keeps providing great content for us. How about that?
That's right. I really appreciate it. I always felt like in the movie Field of Dreams, it should have been right up the street here in Illinois. You know, if you build it, they will come. That's how baseball rocks in the STL, and we're really glad to bring you this podcast because we really are serious Cardinal fans. Feel free to log on to phantommentor.com to find out about more episodes. Feel free to follow us and subscribe to our YouTube channel to follow more episodes of the Birds on the Wire podcast.